brand models.
Thank you. Like Kat, I'm going to stand too. Can I just check that you can hear me in the back row?
Yes.
Yeah, and if I get a bit faint, I'll use the mic, but I'd probably rather not. I've spent all my 47 years in Scotland. You see, I'm not one of these people who are concerned about giving their age away. In fact, all of that in Edinburgh. There's some things that I've seen change. I left school after 5th year, sat 4 hires, did 1 teacher. Did anyone ever suggest that I should think about a university career? Not one. It was the kind of school where there was just very little expectation. Now, I know for a fact that school has improved markedly, but other things haven't changed. I left school and I ended up being a yopper. I was on the Youth Opportunities Programme, and I'm very, very concerned, having just taken part in an inquiry in committee I sit in Parliament into youth underemployment, that we're heading down the same road again. It simply isn't good enough. I see far too little change in far too many areas in this country, and I think it could be much better. And some people have said to me, well, vote for a different party. You'll all have heard this line, we don't need to change the constitution, we simply need to change the party. But I do remain unconvinced. I was looking at some figures today, and since the war, we have made a difference. The Scottish vote has made a difference in only 3 out of 18 elections. So we really very much are the tail that's being wagged by a bigger dog. And one of the things that's really important to me is governance. And that is one of the reasons I will be voting yes in the referendum, because I really want my vote to make a difference. I think it's fair to say that very few Greens have national identity at the heart of our politics, but we are really keen on decentralisation and giving as much power as possible to the local community. So bringing political and economic power to the people is a really important Green principle. And I'm absolutely convinced that we need to see real transformation in our society and our economy, and that this can best be achieved by a small Scotland, by Scotland as a small country, and there are so many examples that we can look to. In Denmark, 85% of renewables are community owned. You know, that's why they don't have billionaire cheerleaders arriving on their shores telling them that this isn't a bad idea. They understand the benefits, because the benefits are going direct into the pockets of local people, not huge absentee landlords and multinational corporations. And this is the model that we need to see more of. Why else do I want to see independence? We have to get rid of Trident. This is an absolute... It's an absolutely obscene waste of money. It doesn't work, it makes us less secure. If we're interested in security, then we need to look at water, we need to look at food, we need to look at the climate. Because when people know that there is a future for them, that they can survive, that they can feed their families, that they will have warm houses, they're more relaxed, they're less concerned with going to war with their neighbours or protecting themselves from some imaginary threat. Trident is all about fear, and we don't need to be afraid. We are, as Kat has said, one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and as Kat also pointed out, we are one of the most unequal. And it simply doesn't have to be like this, and I think we have a far better future to aspire to. And again, I will be voting yes for those reasons. And a truly local economy, I think the economy is where there's so much we can achieve. The greatest transformation, it will take longer than a decade to achieve. But we have to start looking at an economy based on the entrepreneurial talent of our local people. On the committee I sit in Parliament, we went to visit Amazon. They have received over £10 million of taxpayers' money to build their huge hangar by the side of a motorway, and to employ, well, they've not employed anywhere near the amount of staff that they have assured us will be employed there. But pouring regional support assistance into companies like this simply doesn't make sense, because when it suits them, as we've seen all too often, they will up and leave. We need to be supporting the small... We need to support the small, sustainable Scottish businesses that are being hammered by the arrival of so many supermarkets on our high streets. They're simply bleeding our local high streets dry. You know, how many local shops have you seen go in recent times? And local shops, they buy from local suppliers, they keep the money in the local economy. Supermarket profits simply head out of our area and into shareholders' pockets. You know all this just as well as I do. But I will disagree with, I thought Kevin made very many excellent points, but he was wrong to suggest that no party is campaigning for fair and progressive taxation. Independence is a fantastic opportunity for a simple and progressive tax policy, and one that supports the move to a local economy. I've questioned John Swinney on whether or not Revenue Scotland would stop supporting these multinational companies. You know, if you look at Starbucks, they move into the high street here in this city, so business rates go up, and then we have, they're not paying their taxes, and we have small businesses who are absolutely, being pushed to the wall and desperately keen to do the right thing, and that is simply unjust. We have to get a grip of this. When I was in Amazon, I actually said to them, you make it very, very difficult for the Scottish people to like you. Will you start considering paying tax? And I just got, the biggest amount of waffle. Oh, I'll tell you what they said actually. We're involved in the local community and we give money to local charities. And I said, that is super, but so do lots of other businesses who also pay their tax. And John Swinney came in to give evidence to our committee, and I asked him if he would make sure that any public procurement bill would ensure that any company operating zero-hour contracts would not benefit from public money. Now, he said the government wouldn't use zero-hour contracts. I actually pointed out Edinburgh University have a phenomenal number of staff on zero-hour contracts. So, this is happening in institutions that we have a great deal of regard for, and we have to start looking at it. People can't plan to pay rents, they couldn't possibly get a mortgage, they don't know if they're going to be able to feed their families. Anyway, John Swinney said he would look at that, but when it came to the issue of Amazon, and I asked if these companies should be getting the support they're getting, the answer was very much around you have to look at the wealth they're creating. But again, I would say this isn't sustainable wealth, and it isn't benefiting the people that I know in the slightest. It's all leaving us, and it is going to the pockets of those who are already phenomenally wealthy. It's putting our bookshops, our record shops, our stores out of business. So, I think being here tonight, one thing that's really heartening, I'm not seeing lots of the usual suspect spaces that I see in lots of political meetings, but I am seeing people that I see walking around in my day-to-day life, and that just makes me feel so heartened for the fact that we really could have a yes vote in 2014. I feel this is such a positive force for good and for transformation. I won't go on too much. I do believe that we can see a Harlaw Reservoir out in Balerno. There's a project there. People are buying into local energy. They're going to see the benefits. Whitmuir Farm out in West Linton, they're selling shares. Local people are going to start to see the benefits. We just have so many opportunities here, and I just, I don't want to wake up the morning after the referendum and think, well, we didn't do all that we could to make sure we got the result that we wanted, and I'll certainly be doing all that I can to ensure that happens. Thank you.